This is a painting dated 1620 of an enslaved African kitchen maid. We don't know her name. We can't see if there are blisters on her hands from working that mortar and pestle. We don't know exactly why her eyes are downcast, although we can guess. We've forgotten this enslaved kitchen maid. Did you all know that slavery is still a problem in our modern world? How many of you knew that a lot of the foods we eat in the United States come to our grocery stores through slave labor? The U.S. imports over $144 billion of goods that slaves made. I want you to read this slide, please. Chocolate is one of the top 5 goods produced through modern slavery. 75% of all cocoa beans are sourced from West African regions with slave labor and human trafficking. Our current food system is not humanitarian, nor is it environmentally friendly. A food system is a complex web of people, ideas, and activities that support the production, distribution, and consumption of the things that are eaten in a region. It involves food's journey from family farms to consumers' plates. Historians have been slow to study the origins of America's unfree food system. We prefer to tell ourselves that European settlers made America great on their own. We celebrate this myth as a nation each Thanksgiving. The truth is that not all food was produced on small family farms with free labor. Judith Carney and Frederick Opie have tried to raise awareness that the foods we eat today have had a long history of ties to slavery. They've tried to explain where the foods we eat come from and how they got here. Their hope and mine is that increased awareness will reform consumer behavior. Food historians have studied recipes, cookbooks, cooks, and the art of cooking to better understand foodways. Their important work embeds American eating in African cultural traditions, and this linkage points us toward early American food chains that were nurtured and sustained through slave labor. Historians of slavery who write about early American food production have focused almost exclusively on 2 items, sugar and rice. But these were not the only unfree foods that were produced. In North America, there were food manufacturers who sourced raw materials from tropical plantations. I want to use chocolate to take you from farm to table in early America. I join with other scholars in raising awareness of the unfree origins of our food system. My hope is that we change the way we eat today. I also want us to think about early America as more than a collection of self-sufficient farmers. What do you think about this image? Does it make you hungry or thirsty? Chocolate was eaten and it was drunk. It was viewed as a comfort food that could ease burdens. It was also seen as a source of energy. Indigenous people saw chocolate as a food of the gods. For these reasons, chocolate was valuable. The early history of chocolate is well documented. Europeans first appropriated indigenous land and botanical knowledge for cacao cultivation. Europeans then imported enslaved Africans to work on equatorial plantations to cultivate cacao trees and refine cocoa beans. Roughly 10 million Africans were enslaved and forcibly relocated to the Western Hemisphere. The majority worked on sugar plantations in Brazil, but European planters also relied on the Atlantic slave trade to provide labor on tropical cacao plantations. It typically took 16 enslaved people and an overseer to produce cocoa beans in cacao walks or rows on plantations. The workers had to clear land to plant these cacao walks. The overseer used a whip to make his gang cultivate cacao, harvest the fruit, and extract, cure, and package the beans. The beans weren't magic. They didn't ship themselves to overseas manufacturers to be refined into chocolate for consumers. Ships and maritime laborers and shipping magnates distributed cocoa beans to the rest of the world, and a portion of these maritime laborers were freed and enslaved Africans. The mass production of chocolate was big business in early America. By 1768, there were over 100 chocolate mills in North America. They cranked out over 244 tons of chocolate each year, and early American manufacturers used slave labor in the refining process. The work involved in mills to convert cocoa beans to chocolate was physically demanding and highly repetitive. Free laborers did not want to carry barrels from docks to warehouses. They didn't want to use millstones to grind beans into bits, and they did not want to roast, shell, and grind those bits each and every day. Early American chocolate production was an unfree food system. It relied 100% on enslaved African labor for the production of cocoa beans. There were enslaved maritime laborers involved in distribution, and manufacturers in North America relied on enslaved African workers to produce chocolate in bulk. Aaron Lopez was one of the wealthiest men in North America. He sent slave ships to Africa that relocated over 1,000 Africans to New World plantations, and he started manufacturing chocolate. He didn't want to have to pay large sums to hire white skilled artisans, so Lopez hired enslaved people. Prince Updike was one of Lopez's enslaved wage-earning chocolate makers. Prince was a self-hire who used his free time to get a side job. Prince couldn't get any job. He was an African-American man in a land of white supremacy. But employers such as Lopez sought out cheap, vulnerable labor. Who was an enslaved woman who worked in that kitchen? She was one of many, many enslaved Africans who made and who continue to make food for consumers in America. Remember her downcast gaze the next time you go to the grocery store and the next time you think about our food system. Thank you all.